Welcome to my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle is directed by Jonathan Liesby-Man. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Anyways, it stars Megan Fox, Will Arquette, William Fichtner, and a bunch of other actors and actresses. Now, the premise of this movie follows the origin story of the Ninja Turtles, how they become the Ninja Turtles, and how they meet April O'Neil, and then how they face Shredder. It's just a reboot of what we've seen in the past. Now, going into this film, I went in with pretty low expectations because of everything attached to this movie. Michael Bay producing it, Megan Fox being April O'Neil, the director they hired who has a resume with a bunch of films I personally have never cared for. There was just a lot going against this movie, so I went in with pretty low expectations. Now, going into this review, I gotta warn you guys, I'm going to be talking about spoiler things. So if you haven't seen the movie, I suggest you go see it if you have any remote interest in seeing it. If you don't and you don't care about being spoiled, then let's carry on with this review. There was a lot of things about this movie that I absolutely did not like. It was so much that any remote thing that I absolutely enjoyed about this movie was completely drowned out by all the bad in this film. The first thing that I did not care about this movie is April O'Neil. And not that the fact that Megan Fox was playing her. That was a hit on April O'Neil. But the fact that they put so much importance to April O'Neil's character to the point that the movie should have been titled April O'Neil and the Ninja Turtles, because her role was so big in this film. The movie starts off with her, the movie ends with her, with a bunch of her in the middle. Everything was affiliated to her. The Turtles got the names that they got, you know, Michelangelo, Donatello, all their names were given because of her. She named them. She introduced them to pizza. She gave Splinter his name as well. She's the reason why they ended up in the sewers. Everything attached to the Turtles was because of April O'Neil in one form or another. She was the star of this film, really. The Turtles were just background things. They were just secondary characters to her. That is not what a Ninja Turtle movie should be. The Ninja Turtle movie should be about the Turtles foremost, and then everybody else being secondary to them, and that's not how this movie was. Now, speaking of changing the origin story of the Turtles and Splinter, they changed it in a way that doesn't follow any blueprint of the previous stories. And that's the thing about the previous, movies, cartoons, and comics, is that they always follow the same blueprint in one form or another. Master Yoshi has always been a character that appeared and was always mentioned in one form or another in all the other stories of the Ninja Turtles. Regardless what medium you're talking about, he was always a factor to that story. In this movie, he's not mentioned whatsoever, which is something that's completely different to any other Ninja Turtle cartoon, movie, comic books, what have you. And that's the thing that really upset me once the origin story was explained. Basically, the way Splinter learns martial arts is through a book that he finds in the sewers when he's already transformed into a walking, talking rat. And once he finds it, he decides to then teach the Turtles how to become ninjas through that book. He basically learns how to do ninjutsu, which is something that I don't think you can master through a book, but he ends up mastering it through a book and then teaching the Turtles how to master their weapons and to become ninjas. But the way they go about it in the movie, it's just something that you really have to shut your brain about and just accept. At least in the previous stories, Master Yoshi either becomes Splinter, which makes sense that he would know the art enough to teach Turtles how to become ninjas, or that Splinter is actually a pet of Master Yoshi and he grew up as a rat seeing Master Yoshi doing all these techniques. But in this story, Splinter has no affiliation to Japan whatsoever. He learns everything from a book, which is kind of ridiculous because prior to him getting the book, he has the hairstyle of almost like a master of, karate. And then once he finds the book, him and the Turtles become really infatuated with the Japanese culture, to the point that Splinter actually talks in an accent. His first language isn't Japanese, so why does he have an accent? Who knows, but he does. Another person who's never really mentioned by name is Hiroko Saki, and that's somebody who Master Yoshi had an affiliation with because they knew each other from Japan, and that's why Splinter had a vendetta against Shredder, because Shredder was the reason why Master Yoshi was either killed or why Master Yoshi's girlfriend at the time was killed. There was always some type of affiliation, either if Splinter was Master Yoshi himself or if Splinter was just Master Yoshi's pet. There was always a connection that made sense as to why Splinter had a vendetta against Shredder. But in this movie, Splinter has no affiliation to Shredder whatsoever. So the vendetta that was a deep story that of sadness, that connection and that depth of the story is completely lost in this film because that connection is not there. Now, speaking of Eric Sachs, who's played by William Fichtner, I have a feeling that Eric Sachs was going to be Shredder in this movie. And I say that because when the first trailer dropped and it was kind of implied that Eric Sachs was going to be Shredder, people lost their minds on the internet. People were very upset over the fact that Shredder wasn't going to be an Asian man, that he was going to be played by a white man. And people didn't want that. And I feel like the studio for this movie, got wind of that. And they're like, we need to change this. If we don't change this, people are going to be very upset. We're not going to make any money. People are not going to go see the movie, especially, Ninja Turtle fans like myself. I would have boycotted this movie if they did change Shredder, honestly. So, during that period of time between the first trailer and the second trailer, there were shoots. They did reshoots during that time. And I feel like during that reshoot, they did change the whole Eric Sachs being Shredder, and then they hired on an Asian actor to play Shredder. And I say this because there's scenes with Eric Sachs and Shredder that feel like last minute scenes. Like they're on these small sets. They're not ever interacted in a way that seems like it was something that feels like it should be there. Like the flow of the movie just did not work with those scenes. Again, pure speculation on my behalf, but it's just something about the movie that just didn't flow correctly between the Shredder and Eric Sachs storyline that makes sense to the point that I feel like that's what was supposed to be there as the original, story. That I feel like they did change it at the last minute due to the negative reaction. Now, this movie is a type of movie that, once again, you can't think too much while watching it, and I don't like movies like that. I like movies where you don't have to, shut your brain off to watch. And I don't want to watch an Ninja Turtle movie and be like, I need to shut my brain off. Even though it's a movie about talking turtles, I don't want to shut my brain off to the point that I should just not logically think about anything while watching the film. And I feel like there's a lot of moments in this movie that are just not logical. Like, there's a particular scene where April O'Neil is going to visit Eric Sachs, and he supposedly lives 45 minutes away from the city. And New York City is void of any snow. It looks dry. It doesn't look very cold. But yet 45 minutes away from the city where Eric Sachs' home is located, it's a winter wonderland. There's snow everywhere. There's piles of snow, enough to create an avalanche. That just doesn't make any logical sense. As a person of native New York, I can tell you 45 minutes outside of the city, you're going either New Jersey, you're going either to Long Island, you're going to the Bronx. If you're lucky, you're probably going to hit upstate New York. And I can tell you right now, where Eric Sachs' home is located, that doesn't exist 45 minutes away from the city, that doesn't have any snow or any evidence that it's a cold winter for there to be as much snow as one sees. The other very stupid scene in this movie is April O'Neil's father's death. So when Splinter is explaining her father's death, and when April O'Neil is talking about her father's death, it is explained that he dies in a fire, that he sets himself. I mean, he sets a fire in a lab in such a stupid way that he gets stuck in the lab with the fire, which is so idiotic. And so this is explained that he basically dies in the lab in the fire. But there's a scene between Eric Sachs and April where Eric Sachs is like, no, I killed your father. I shot him. While the scene is taking place, I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't make any sense. At what point did you walk into a burning lab with her father's already dying from the flames that he set himself, that you came in and shot him? April O'Neil was there. Splinter was there. They all witnessed what took place during that scene. But yet, at some point, you felt like it was your duty to walk into that lab and shoot him while he was already dying from the fire that he set himself in the lab. And the other stupid thing is that April O'Neil actually went after the Turtles and Splinter before actually trying to save her father. Like her father was like, no, don't save me, get out. And she's like, okay, I'll get out, but before I get out, let me go grab the rat and the turtles and save them while not even trying with you just because you told me to get out. And I dislike when they do things like that with the story as no other way but to advance the story. Now the design of the turtles, now this is one of the issues that many people had, myself included. It's not just the way they look, you know, skin wise or facial wise. It's just the overall appearance of them. Like, they're extra. They're just too extra for no reason, just to be extra. I mean, Raphael has a pair of, like, Oakleys on the top of his head. At no point does he take those Oakleys off of his head and put some, you know, over his eyes. They're just there to be there. And he literally does all kinds of tricks, flips, and goes through a bunch of things. And at no point do those glasses ever fall off of the top of his head. But why are they there? Just to show how edgy he is. Just to like, because their personality isn't enough. They feel like little children can't get the personality of these turtles by just, you know, hearing them speak and act. They need to like add things to their overall body so you can tell, hey, Donatello's the smart one. He needs to wear glasses so you know he's the smart one. Look, Mikey is a cool one. That's why he's wearing all those chains around his neck and he has those cool glasses hanging off from them, and he's wearing sweatpants and he's wearing a sweater around his waist because he's the cool one. And I thought that was so idiotic, and it was insulting to my intelligence and intelligence of children all over the world who should be able to tell the difference, because when I was a kid and watching the Ninja Turtles cartoon and just having them looking like this was more than enough for me to tell the difference of who's who through their personality. And they have names, so that's another way to tell them apart as well. So it's just stuff like that that I thought was unnecessary and just over the top to be just over the top and different. There's a lot of things in this movie that they changed that worked fine. As a Ninja Turtle fan or a fan of any franchise, you don't want them to deter from what worked, what made you a fan of these particular characters and the overall story. You want them to, yeah, you can change it here and there, but don't go so off the track the way they did in this movie just for the sake of doing it. And the only remotely positive thing about this movie are the Turtles' personality. That, I have to say, they did a good job with. But the Turtles, again, were so secondary to compare to the human characters and to April O'Neil that it wasn't enough as a Ninja Turtle fan to be like, yeah, that was great to have them have that personality when everything else around them is just completely garbage. And it doesn't help that one of my favorite characters, who's Donatello, obviously, was barely in the movie. And then even Leonardo, poor Leonardo, I have to say, they barely used Leonardo. He was just there as just, I will just say some dialogue and then we'll go back to Michelangelo saying something extremely funny. The Turtles really didn't have as much screen time, and I felt like they really needed to have to really set them up for those who aren't aware of the Ninja Turtles, for them to, you know, for people to sympathize with their characters. And even Splinter was hardly on screen for you to sympathize with anything that happened to him. Like, there is supposed to be this sad moment where he's hurt, and I'm sitting there watching this as a fan of the Ninja Turtles and a fan of Splinter, and I feel absolutely nothing during that scene. I'm like, okay, that happened. Is he gonna die? If he dies, oh well, that happens. Because right now I'm sitting watching this movie with my arms crossed, upset after hearing the origin story, that I'm like, I really don't care what happens to these characters. They can all die, and I'll be fine with it as long as this franchise doesn't continue. Unfortunately, this franchise is most likely going to continue, and me as a Ninja Turtle fan, I'm going to sit on the sidelines and just shake my head and be like, what this could have been if they only tried. And I feel like they didn't try with this movie, and that's the one thing that really upsets me about this film, that they had a franchise that comes from source material that is just wonderful source material, and this is definitely not even scraping anything remotely good about the Ninja Turtles or trying to be a good Ninja Turtle movie. I feel like they did not try with this film, which is very unfortunate because they had something really great in their hands and they just completely threw it in the garbage. They didn't even try. They didn't even try with this movie. Just with the director who they hired as April O'Neil, they just did not try with this film. The people they hired to do the screenplay, once again, they did not try as much as I believe they could have tried. This is something that could have been something really amazing under the right people, and unfortunately, this is the Ninja Turtles that we're given, and this is the Ninja Turtle films that we're going to have to take until something happens sometime in the future when they decide to reboot this franchise again, and hopefully whoever gets this movie in the future does justice to this franchise and to the Turtles and to the overall story and origins of these characters. So who I would recommend this movie to? Basically anyone who has any remote interest in seeing it. If you have any remote interest in seeing it, I guess check it out. If you don't, I suggest you sit this one out. Even though I hate deterring people from movies, I'm just saying this is a movie you possibly will not like if you had no remote interest in seeing it prior to it coming out. So that is my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe.